What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, and we are live with our second mailbag of the podcast, man. And this was an idea that I asked you guys on our community page. Everyone was for it. We had a great time last week. And so, what we'll do is we'll address the few topics that I got submitted throughout this past week. We'll talk about those. Y'all can comment on those in the chat box, man. Let me know y'all's opinions and let's talk some great college football news. And at the end of the show, in case you haven't had a chance to submit your questions, I'll be taking the Q&A live. You guys can ask any questions about any level of college football, any team, anything like that, and we will break it down at the end of the show. We're aiming to go about an hour like we did last week. So if you're tuned in, man, I appreciate you coming by the Blue Bloods. But let's get into it. And we're starting with a question that I got on Twitter, and it was, who should be the favorites for the Player of the Year award at the SWAC week 6 going into week 7. And so how I broke this down is I picked 3 offensive players and 3 defensive players because the SWAC does give out an offensive and defensive player of the year award. And so I figured it would be kind of hard to compare defensive players to offensive players in that regard. So we'll break it down like that. And we'll start out with offensive player of the year. And this is hard because it's really always given to a quarterback unless a skill player has a huge year. So I picked 2 quarterbacks and a skill player that I think has shown, flashes of greatness this year, especially on a team that really hasn't lived up to the hype this year. But we're starting out, and you have to start it out, especially after this past week. Shedeur Sanders is probably right now the number one favorite for the SWAC player of the year on the offensive side of the ball. This kid, as a freshman, man, has thrown for over 1,300 yards. He's completing over 71% of his passes, 11 touchdowns, only 1 pick. He showed some athleticism. This past week against Alabama A&M on the road. Had a huge run at the end of the game on a design QB run and wasn't even touched. Not even close. And he has Jackson State with a strong lead in the SWAC East. And since they got past that A&M game, in terms of Florida A&M and Alabama A&M, I don't think there's a team that, really and truly can hang with Jackson State right this second. So Shedeur Sanders, for me, has to be that guy right now in the clubhouse. I do like this pick of Warren Newman, but what happens is wide receivers who have the stats to have this award, they have to play so well, and usually the quarterback stats match it. And that's why you even see, when Baker Mayfield, and I forget the wide receiver's name from Oklahoma, who got invited to the Heisman ceremony, Baker Mayfield got a lot of the hype, even though the wide receiving stats were crazy. What Warren Newman has to do is end up having more punt and kickoff returns this year, and then you could probably enter him into the conversation because he's going to have to get those stats outside of padding Shedeur's stats because they're kind of tied at the hip in terms of that. Shout out to Sonic Boomman. He says Shedeur might end up being newcomer of the year and player of the year. I agree with that. And yeah, Newman right now is probably easily the special teams player of the year. I don't even think there's a close second at this point in time. The other quarterback, it has to be Jawan Pass for Prairie View. And the only way Jawan Pass probably bumps above Shedeur is, one, he's got to limit the turnovers. He has 5 interceptions already. He's completing about 60% of his passes, over 1,200 yards passing, 8 passing touchdowns. But the way he's going to have to pass Shedeur is he's going to have to go out there and win the SWAC. He's got to win the SWAC. If Jawan Pass goes out there, beats Jackson State in the SWAC championship, wins that West Division over Alcorn, Southern, and some of the teams they have to go up against, that's how Jawan Pass is going to insert his name into this. And you have to give him some credit. If you're a SWAC fan, you got to give Pass some credit for where Prairie View is sitting right now in that West Division with a strong lead. I believe they are the only team with 4 SWAC wins right now in terms of in-conference games, and they have some tough ones coming up, but it puts him on the biggest stage. They still have to go through Alcorn. They still have to go through Southern. They potentially have to go through either FAMU or Jackson State. So The thing helping Jawan pass is he's going to have to do it and be on the biggest stage down the stretch. And the way it helps is that he's going to be on the biggest stage late in the season. You see, it's the same thing with the Heisman race. The bigger games you have on the back end of your schedule, the better it is for your chances to get those Heisman voters votes and have that Heisman moment. You look at Cam in the SEC championship and that Alabama comeback. You look at Manziel later in the season against Alabama. You look at Tebow late in the season in that rain game against Florida State. That's where you have your Heisman moment, and that's where Jawan Pass is going to have a slight advantage over some of these other guys, in this running. The dark horse for me. I'm going to give you all two dark horses in terms of skill players, which I don't think they'll win it because it's a QB dominated award. But let's start with Kamari Averett out of Bethune-Cookman, the tight end / wide receiver they have. He is absolutely setting the world on fire down there in Bethune, even though that team is 0-6 right now. This guy continues to put up numbers, and there's been performances where he's generated like 65 or more percent of the offense for Bethune-Cookman this year. He's got 30 catches, over 500 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns, and he's averaging over 18 yards per catch. And if the only thing hurting him is how bad Bethune's played, but when you look at his stats and what his production is on a very, poor Bethune team, you have to give Kamari Everett some props. He has been putting on a show this season, and even though it's such a long stretch for a tight end or wide receiver to get that credit, he's been putting on a show. Kamari Everett for Bethune right now, to me, has been the best pass catcher in the SWAC this year. Him, Warren Newman probably, and then Hilaire D. Anderson for A&M. Those guys have been the top of the pack. But for Everett to do this with I guess I would say poor quarterback play, to be completely honest with you, I don't like the Patrick kid down at Bethune. For him to be, leading the SWAC like this and some of these receiving stats shows how good he is. And then another name I want to just give a shout out to, Caleb Johnson down at Mississippi Valley State at running back has also been doing some big things down there. Over 400 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, and he's really been the cog to help Valley exceed some of these expectations this season. And they have a chance to get a few SWAC wins. They had a big win over Bethune this past weekend, and I can see them pulling a few more upsets down the stretch. But that offense all starts with Caleb Johnson getting it done on the ground. He's in the top 5 in the SWAC in rushing. He has one of the highest averages, and he has really carried this Mississippi Valley State team through the season. So just to recap for everyone who tuned in late, my 4 picks for Offensive Player of the Year right now were Shedeur Sanders, Jawan Pass, Prairie View quarterback, Kamari Everett, Bethune-Cookman tight end, and Caleb Johnson, Mississippi Valley State running back. Shout out to T for being here, man. It's your boy Oz, man. Appreciate you tuning in. T, you got to go watch some highlights of Bethune. That tight end is legit. He's like 6'6", 250, and he plays. He looks a lot like, in terms of physical build, a lot like Kyle Pitts out there at tight end for Bethune-Cookman. Now, the Defensive Player of the Year, I threw in an honorable mention late, but this is a 2-person race for the Defensive Player of the Year in the SWAC, in my opinion, and it's 2 linebackers that I think are going to take this award, and it's just going to come down to who can play better on the biggest stage down the stretch. We'll start with James Houston, Jackson State defensive end linebacker, and 24 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 2 recoveries, and a touchdown this past weekend against A&M. This guy has been the best player on Jackson State throughout the entire year. I was talking to Mr. Gaddy last weekend during the A&M game. Houston is the best overall draft prospect on Jackson State right now. Over Nugget, over Shedeur, over any of the wide receivers, James Houston is the top, in my opinion, defensive player of the year for the SWAC and the best NFL draft prospect on that team. You look at what he did at Florida, and for me, he put so much trust into Deion Sanders and Thurman on making that positional move from middle linebacker down to edge rusher. And listen, I told Mr. Gaddy this, and I'll tell you guys this. He should write a personal note to thank Coach Deion Sanders for probably earning him multi-millions of dollars in the NFL, because now what he's done is put on tape how versatile he can be in a 3-4, in a 4-3, in a 4-2-5, in a 3-3-5. He can play middle linebacker. He can play outside linebacker. He can play edge. He can step into that 3 tech. He can play so many positions. The scouts are going to love that. I think he's going to test very well at the NFL Combine. And for me, James Houston is the best chance for Jackson State to have a second or third round, I guess third round NFL draft prospect. Let's see. We got T said, I agree. Houston hasn't played against any good tackles this season, but he's played lights out. We got your boy Oz saying James Houston. Sonnet Boo says James Houston. CFL Podcast says James and Aubrey. Shout out to David Prater, man. Appreciate you tuning in. CFL Podcast said we ain't going to bring up the comment he had on Oklahoma last year. I'm glad he lived that down. Listen, CFL, it was a bad comment. Oklahoma was arguably the hottest team in the country at the end of last year when you really look at how Radler and Ramondre Stevenson were running the ball. And then Florida had, I believe it was like, off the top of my head, I think it was like 12 opt-outs in that game. Kyle Pitts opts out. They had one receiver in like their top 5 receivers opt in. All their running backs opted out. I just think it was a recipe for disaster. And when you know that many players aren't playing, you can't do that. He pretty much said that Oklahoma, like the Big 12 and Oklahoma was nothing, and like pretty much that they were going to blow them out. And then Oklahoma came out there and put a real beating on them in the bowl game. But the other guy who I don't think a lot of people are talking about, and I know my guy Mr. Campbell and Mr. I believe it's Sweat on our channel, Isaiah Land for FAMU has probably been one of the more impressive players in the country. It's just he got off to a little bit of a slow start against Jackson State, but over these past few weeks, he has been arguably the most dominant force in the SWAC. 22 tackles, 11 tackles for loss. He leads the SWAC with 10 sacks this year. Guys, 10 sacks for this kid. That is 3 more than James Houston has put up this year. Has a forced fumble, has a fumble recovery. Isaiah Land has been the hottest player. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he had 4 or 5 sacks last week. Just in the South Carolina State game, Isaiah Land has really stepped up for FAMU. This guy is absolutely legit. And I think it's going to be a running for Isaiah Land and James Houston down the stretch on who takes this Defensive Player of the Year award. But like I did with offense, my honorable mention is Jason Dumas. Prairie View A&M defensive tackle, has 3 sacks, 7.5 tackles for loss from that D tackle spot. He's got a tougher time because coming from that nose to that 1 or 2 or 3 tech, that's going to be a tough matchup for him to kind of compare stats of Land and James Houston coming off the edge, because those edge guys have a lot more opportunities to make their mark. But Dumas is having a great year. He was a SWAC All-American this past season, so I think he'll replicate that again this year. But he's someone I just wanted to throw into the conversation because personally I think he deserves it, and I really, really like what Dumas is doing at Prairie View. So I'll address this question real quick. Nosa, what happened to Radler at OU? Man, I really think it's just a case of losing your confidence, man. Really and truly, when you look at what he's playing, what he did this year, he wasn't really struggling. He was completing like 76% of his passes, leading the offense. What happened, though, is he lost his deep ball, in my opinion. I did a breakdown on it in our Oklahoma preview for the Red River shootout this past week. His deep ball has just disappeared. He has one of the lowest graded deep passing accuracies in the country. And in this Oklahoma offense, if you can't push the ball down the field and make those downfield throws, the offense doesn't work. So for me, Radler lost his confidence in his deep ball, and then he lacks the confidence in his athleticism outside the pocket. And so that's what separates him from Caleb Williams, who came in and put up 300 total yards on Texas and really led them to the comeback. T said FAMU coaching is terrible. I think he'd be better with better coaching. CFL said I found out about him yesterday. dude is legit. CFL starting stuff. Call Houston on the house phone and ask them to apologize. Y'all leave the house phone alone, man. Yeah, it's your boy Oz. Being ejected from that ULM game was huge for Houston stats because if he could get a few more sacks in that game, a bunch more tackles, and make arguably he could have changed that game against ULM. And so being ejected so early really does hurt his resume right now. Sonic Boom said, with Houston in the game, JSU probably beats ULM. I agree. Gaddy will rise again. Listen, Gaddy had a really good game this past weekend. I will have to say. I was talking to actually Mr. Gaddy about it, and that D line is starting to show some real chemistry. And when you look at the big three of what Jackson State has on the D line, Coinus Miller in the middle from Auburn, Gaddy, and also also James Houston, you're looking at that big three, and you're looking like, man, is there an offensive line that that can block them? Because I'm really not sure right now off the top of my head if anyone can block those three guys consistently. Because listen, I'm an Auburn guy. Coinus is a stud in the middle, and I think Coinus has NFL potential at Auburn. I promise y'all, Auburn didn't want to lose him, and he was one of Auburn's biggest targets in that recruiting class. And I was personally talking to Mr. Gaddy about this. The only reason Coinus didn't get playing time at Auburn is he was stuck on the depth chart behind Derek Brown. You guys know who Derek Brown is. He was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. It was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year the year he left Auburn. So let's not say Coinus doesn't have talent. It was just, man, he was stuck behind a generational type talent on that defensive line. And then you also had Marlon Davidson at DN, a second-round draft pick. Big Cat was on that offensive line, on that defensive line, now down at UCF. There was just so many people on the Auburn defensive line that you couldn't really compete with. No one was beating Derek Brown out. Just like what T said. Hampton helps Houston, Miller, and Gaddy with their job. I agree, and that's what I was talking to some people about this past weekend at the game, that the reason that Houston's move to DN really helped is because of the chemistry those linebackers already had at JSU. They complement each other so well that Keontae Hampton is just always seems to be in the right place. Yes, he might not be the best coverage guy, but he knows how to run the scheme, and he's in the right place at the right time. And so that's really what separates that. But Morpheus, no roundtable. Man, I haven't heard anything about a roundtable. I know CFL, on his video he dropped today, said he was busy this week. So I don't know anything about a roundtable this week. Hopefully we'll have one soon. I'm down whenever. Y'all know I'm always ready to talk football. CFL podcast. See, I didn't know that about Coinus. Some Auburn fan podcast was trashing him, saying he was a disappointment. Listen, man, every fan base, and I know Jackson State fans can speak on it, and any fan watching this can speak on their fan base. There's always those fans that when a player doesn't necessarily live up, because I mean, Coinus was like a top 100 recruit. Anytime he didn't, anytime a player like that doesn't necessarily live up to the hype at that school, they're always going to have issues with them. Just like there's a bunch of people that have issues. There's Ohio State fans that have issues with Joe Burrow, et cetera, et cetera. Don't let any real Auburn fan knows Coinus Miller was legit and that we honestly needed him. But listen, as an Auburn fan now, we really could have used Coinus on the inside of our D line. I will trade y'all for Coinus Miller. Listen, I don't know what y'all want. Can I send y'all Bo Nix? Potentially, I'll take Coinus Miller back. Absolutely. Hampton needs to bulk up and get faster. He's like an on-the-field coach that won't get you drafted. Let's see. I saw a question up here. I'm going to try to go back up to it. Lionel said Bluebloods is Oklahoma's QB transfer portal. I think so, Lionel. Because I don't know if you saw the storyline after the game. Spencer Rattler did not celebrate with the team. He went straight to the locker room, was out of any pictures or celebration videos or anything. There was a video of him walking straight to the locker room after the game. I think Spencer Rattler is in the transfer portal immediately. Now, where he goes is interesting, because what I think is going to happen is some interesting spots would be LSU, because as y'all see on the topics, we'll have to talk about it, but they could be a new coach at LSU, and that's a place you're going to have great wide receivers and a good scheme to succeed. USC is going to need a quarterback soon. Ohio State's been the popular transfer destination. That's no longer the case. UNC would be an interesting spot with Sam Howell headed to the NFL draft. Mac Brown, has Drake May behind him, but Spencer Rattler could be a huge piece in that cog. Also, Dan Mullen, man, has he been impressed enough with Emory Jones not to go after a new quarterback? We don't know. Miami's also an interesting option. So there's a few places in the country that I think Spencer Rattler could fall, and I think he's going to try to find another Power 5 job where he can try to go make an impact. Rattler's supposed to be the man this year. Yeah, he didn't take any bad hits. Personally, he just hasn't lived up to the hype. In my opinion, I'm just glad CFL didn't do the last two roundtables. O State had issues with wide receiver at Bama. Okay, I let's see. Sonic Boom, do you think there's be any upgrades on the JSU defensive line? Man, if I had to pick one thing, because I think James Houston is out of there ASAP, I think they just have to find another edge presence in this next class. Personally, I think they need somebody who's going to just be a sole pass rusher to combine with Gaddy on the other side, who'll probably still be there after this season. They're just going to have to find someone that brings that physicality combined with the athleticism and experience that they got in the James Houston off the edge. So for me, other than that, I'm not really looking for anything huge. You got your D tackle solved. I think the Evans kid is a freshman. He's going to develop into a run stopper. You have Coinus on the inside. Now it's for JSU, it's about depth. When you look at the elite D lines in college football, you see the teams that have 6 to 8 guys they can rotate in and out against up tempo offenses and keep the offensive linemen worn down. And so for me, I think it's developing the depth behind those front guys for Jackson State, and also in this class, adding 1 or 2 elite pass rushers to that D line is something that Jackson State is probably going to have to do. So that's probably the biggest thing for me. Let's see. He said McLean will be back. Houston's a senior. Yeah, Houston will be gone this year, and so I need a new Keontae. Yeah, if I'm looking at anything for Jackson State, it's this. One, that they personally, I would say that they have to add an elite linebacker. What I say is that I need a linebacker that can play sideline to sideline, but also can step back into coverage, because I think that D line for Jackson State is probably going to be good enough in these next coming years to get pressure with just 3 or 4. And so can you drop those linebackers back into coverage without having to blitz every play, and trust them in man coverage and trust them to run a proper zone? So for me, those are going to be the keys on defense, is to find that linebacker that can play sideline to sideline. Someone like you see in a Kobe Dean, a Roquan Smith, someone like that for them, a Noah Sewell. They don't have to be those level type of guys, but that's the type of player I would like to see Jackson State get. And then the other thing is, I need to see them get some bruisers in the middle of that O-line, man. They have to get some guards and centers that are mean and physical and can win the line of scrimmage. There's been too many times they lost the point of attack on the inside of the offensive line, and they didn't communicate, and they allowed an explosive play from the defense. They broke down protection, because what Jackson State is going to have to realize, all you have to do is protect Shador. You saw what happened this weekend when he had all day to throw. He's got the ability to sit back there and pick most of these defenses in the SWAC apart. All you have to do is protect him and give him some semblance of a running game. So getting some interior guys for that O-line is going to be the number one thing for me, is trying to get a guard, center, those type of positions to really fortify that front seven. Let's see. The question number 2 is a no. He's Sonic Boom said, yeah, we need to get a good linebacker and pass rusher. Definitely upgrade O-line. The portal is probably going to be big. Lionel, so I've actually looked right before this live. Jackson State has no commitments right now for the 2022 class, but like CFL just said, they're not announcing anything until December. He's staying optimistic, but for me, the coverage of SWAC recruiting is so different than Power 5. Like, I'm a writer for Fly War Eagle for Auburn. I could write an article every single day about a different Auburn recruit that's visiting, that's on campus that's potentially considering Auburn. The SWAC coverage is so different because it's kind of in the weeds, and unless you know somebody on campus who can give you that inside information, you're really out of the loop. And so for me, it's a much harder to kind of speculate on who they have coming in and who they don't, unless you're on campus and know someone who will give you that information. And as y'all know, I'm not that plugged into Jackson State. I don't think Coach Prime's given me that access anytime soon, but I'll keep my ear to the ground and let you know on that. Notice that Coach Prime said they got some good linebackers, and they're just waiting on Miller and Hamp to leave. CFL is supposed to be in the recruiting. Terrence said UK is tough on that D end to stop that GA rushing attack. Terrence, listen, if UK pulls off that upset, you're talking about absolute chaos for the college football playoff, because you're looking at Bama, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon. I mean, you have so many teams then with one loss that it's chaos. And then if that happens, you're looking at Cincinnati being the number 2 team in the country. If I told y'all that Cincinnati would be number 2 in the country on October, mid-October, you guys probably would have unsubscribed because y'all would have been like, y'all don't know what you're talking about. That's the type of ramification that we have if Georgia gets upset this week. Personally, y'all saw my breakdown today. I just don't trust, I personally don't trust that Kentucky can run the ball. I really, really don't. I think that Georgia's defense is that good. Guys, I've said it over and over again. Kobe Dean is the best linebacker in the entire country. And I just think that defense is so good, man. I've not seen a defense in a long time play sideline to sideline with that type of size in a long time. I mean, guys, Jordan Davis on the inside of that line, the D tackle, is like 6'6", like 300-something pounds, and runs like a 4.7. I mean, I don't think people grasp how ridiculous athletic that defensive line and linebackers are for Georgia. It is absolutely different up there. I mean, like T said, Georgia's D-line is absolute monsters right now. Let me try to catch up with some of these comments. Sonic Boom said, you have any picks as the top SWAC secondary players? Does JSU need to upgrade there? So, Sonic, I really like the young kid. I always forget his name. The number 12 kid on that JSU has right now. I really like him. I would like to see them get a better in coverage for safety. So when they go to that dime or nickel look, do they have that guy who can play shut down safety in the back end of that defense? That's the one thing they have, but they do have a bunch of run stopping safeties. And so when you're looking at stopping the run, I honestly think Jackson State is set there. They just need a few more elite guys on the back end that can make some plays. And I know they got some young guys that probably haven't seen the field, because, I mean, when you have Nugget, CJ, and everything like that, they probably won't get as much time. But right now, that's the one thing I think is missing on that Jackson State secondary. Appreciate you telling Prime I'm a good guy. I'll talk to All Script for you, Det. Let's see. T said I would give Ed Orgeron another year. LSU was just national champions 2 years ago. We'll move to that in a second after I catch up on these comments. We've seen what happened to Cincy last year, though. No way Kentucky beats Georgia. The Bulldogs have the most dominant defense I've ever seen. It's your boy Oz says it just feels like one of those years. CFL said, we know Coastal won't get a shot in the playoffs if they go undefeated, but what's the ceiling for them if they do a big-time bowl game maybe? I think Coastal ceiling is probably a New Year's Six bowl. You're looking at a similar situation like UCF had a few years ago when they beat Auburn, competed with LSU in 2018. They got LSU in the Fiesta Bowl. They got Auburn in the Peach Bowl. Memphis got to go play Penn State in the Cotton Bowl. I believe the Peach Bowl also had Houston play Ole Miss a few years back. That's probably the ceiling for Coastal, is for them to go get a chance like Cincinnati did last year and go play, an SEC team, a Big 12 team. They can be matched up with an Oklahoma, a Florida, a Kentucky, someone like that, and then get a chance to prove what they have. So I think that's probably the ceiling for Coastal. They just don't have the schedule, CFL. They don't play a damn team worth a damn. Their schedule is just atrocious, and they have to start scheduling better non-conference games, because they had Kansas on the schedule, but as we know, Kansas is absolutely atrocious. So that didn't help their strength of schedule at all, man. How many more games for Memphis needs to fire some defensive coaches? Sonic Boom, it was probably 2 games ago because that defense for Memphis is atrocious, and then it has cost them a lot of games down the stretch. The UK O line is very good, run blocking team, maybe the best in college football. I agree with you on that. They can run the ball like nobody else. I mean, Chris Rodriguez is absolutely he's someone to watch this weekend. And you saw what he did, against Florida, against LSU. He personally is one of the best running backs in college football. They have that front. That Dare Rosenthal and a bunch of those O linemen are legit. So for me, that's if they can run for 150 to 200 yards on Georgia, which is way, way, way over the top and probably won't happen. That's probably the only way they're going to win, Terrence. I mean, they got to run the ball this weekend, and nobody in their right mind probably sees that happening. Now, John, so I'm an LSU fan. Ed botching coordinator and assistant hires is a problem. Giving him another year won't fix it. So let's talk about that, and then I'll get back to y'all's comments. Will Coach Ed Orgeron make it through 2021? I personally say no. As y'all know, my co-host B-Dub, he's off taking a break. He did come up to Alabama A&M with me this weekend, but he's an LSU guy. He lives in Baton Rouge. He said that Ed Orgeron is pretty much on the hook right now. You look at not only his coordinator and assistant hires, where personally, last year he said he didn't even interview his defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator hire, which I've never heard in my life of you not interviewing your offense and defensive coordinator. That is just atrocious management of a program. But on top of that, last week in the press conference, so you get beat by Kentucky, and Coach Ed Orgeron says, I was surprised on how well they ran the football. I don't understand how that's even the case when Kentucky's running back was leading the SEC in rushing yards coming into the game. So it's not even it's not even the botches of hiring. It's also the fact that he just doesn't seem to be prepared. And then you had the comment on his coaching show where he told the dude that there's the Bayou Swamps for people like him, and he's getting criticized left and right. He has the scandal off the field. There's just so many things swirling around LSU right now. And what's gonna hurt him is now Kayshon Boutte is hurt. Derek Stingley's hurt. They have no running game. And so you're getting to the point where you're like, who do I turn to on this team to rally them together? And I don't think you could say you trust anybody on that team to really, I guess, get things rolling. Max Johnson has been playing his butt off, man. He just doesn't have any help outside of Kayshon Boutte. They got a bunch of young wide receivers that are unproven that haven't done anything on the biggest level. And now you lose Kayshon Boutte, which was getting 50% of the targets in the first place. So it's just a recipe for disaster. And I think there was a question: who would you go after? Okay, so I know LSU fans have talked Lane Kiffin. I know LSU fans have potentially talked Bill O'Brien. Others have talked Joe Brady. For me, LSU is a better job than USC. So I still think LSU will get first dibs on whoever they potentially want. I still think you have to look at the Louisiana Lafayette coach down there. He's been balling with that team. You've got to look at Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina potentially. But if you want to make a splash hire, I don't think you can go wrong with a James Franklin. If you can beat out USC for James Franklin, how big would that be? Because you saw James Franklin, he brought a winning culture to Vanderbilt, guys. He had Vanderbilt beating SEC teams, finishing in the top half of the SEC East at Vanderbilt, and went to Penn State shortly after all the allegations and all the scandals happened, and turned that program into I guess a year in and year out top 10, top 15 team outside of the COVID year. And what could his recruiting be like if he got the LSU location, if he got the LSU money, if he got the LSU history? Penn State has the number one recruiting class in this next class under James Franklin. What could he do at LSU with the resources and the recruiting prowess that university holds? I think James Franklin is by far and away the best candidate for LSU if they can prom away. That's a big if T. You're right. I don't know if he'll leave, but James Franklin is by far, in my opinion, the best candidate. And yes, CFL, they miss Joe Brady, and the rumors about bringing in Joe Brady as a head coach, I don't know if I like that. He has no head coaching experience, and just because he ran a great offense with a bunch of future NFL stars on it with Jefferson and Burrow and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and all that and all those guys they had, I don't know if that will translate into being a head coach, in my opinion. John said, I'll listen to about 5 hours of Baton Rouge sports talk a day when I'm working. According to one of the show hosts with connections, Ed would already be gone if they had a interim head coach in place. That's interesting, John. So maybe he'll make it through the season because of that, but we'll see. Someone that would be interesting is, I believe it's Jabbar Jalouk, which they could probably get from UL to be something, but I don't know. I don't know who you would put in that role. But yeah, he's building a powerhouse at Penn State. So Terrence, that's actually funny. There was actually a rumor started by one of the LSU shows that says that they should go after Nick Saban. And Brandon sent it to me, and man, I can't believe there's really LSU fans out there that think they would land Nick Saban from Alabama. But we will just leave it at that. Oh yeah, Jordy. Yeah, so Bama now has it that tight end just committed last week. I forgot about him. That tight end's legit too, guys. I'm just gonna be 100 with you guys. That tight end is absolutely legit. James Franklin wasn't really successful at Vanderbilt, but yes, LSU would be a huge upgrade. And also, the number one thing he should be able to do at LSU is possibly get a quarterback. Man, I don't think you guys understand how good Penn State would be if they had anybody other than Sean Clifford. I mean, if you gave them one of the top 15 quarterbacks in college football, man, how good could Penn State really be? I mean, they have a great defense every year. They have a solid run game. Jahan Dotson is a legit wide receiver. I just think with the resources at LSU, it'd be a match. And like, Crazy Criminal said, who else would you try to get? I don't think Lane Kiffin's leaving Ole Miss for LSU after just a year. And outside of that, who can you convince to come? I've heard Luke Fickell, but now with Cincinnati moving to the Power Five, is he going to move to another Power Five job if he's already going to Power Five and what he's built at Cincinnati, and they're about to possibly be a top 2 team in the country? So that one might be off the board. And then outside of that, I don't think you can convince Mario Cristobal to come from Oregon. Auburn tried that, and he signed like a 7-year extension. And the buyout on that thing is huge. I do like the Bill O'Brien thing. So if you guys don't know, yes, he had some struggles in the NFL, but Bill O'Brien was the coach that took over right after Joe Paterno and really built Penn State back up from what they once what they got torn down from with all the Sandusky allegations and everything like that. So Bill O'Brien is a master of rebuilding programs. How he would fit into the LSU culture, I don't know. I think it would also really depend on how Alabama does this year. And, does he want to just stay 1 year and be out, or does he want to stay with Nick Saban like Sarkisian did and do a year or two and get some things under his belt? John said, according to one of the local radio hosts in Baton Rouge, the short list for LSU's next head coach is Franklin, Kiffin, Fickell, and O'Brien. I personally think if I had to rank those 4 names, guys, in terms of, I'll do ranking in terms of who would be the best hire. I would say Franklin, Fickell, Kiffin, O'Brien, in my opinion. But I'll let you guys comment how you guys would rank those 4 candidates out of them. But I personally think James Franklin would be a splash hire for LSU and an immediate upgrade over Coach Ed Orgeron, just in my opinion. So CFL said, how legit is Kool-Aid McKinstry at Bama so far? I haven't been keeping up with him, but I got high hopes. So CFL, his role in the preseason was supposed to be bigger than what it is now. But with the emergence of a Malachi Moore, a Josh Jobe, a Jordan Battle, and some of those guys in the secondary, Kool-Aid really hasn't had as big of a role. But in my opinion, I think Kool-Aid is going to be the future of that Bama secondary, as Josh Jobe probably heads to the NFL very soon. But I've heard in all the practices in the spring, he was the leader of that secondary, and he is going to be legit. And I think right now it's really hard to crack Saban's starting lineup as a true freshman. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock into it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him earn some playing time down the stretch for Alabama this year. But I think he's going to be a legit corner, man. I was so upset when Auburn didn't land that kid because I think personally he's going to live up to that number one corner ranking. John said Lane wants to win championships. He can do that at LSU. I definitely agree with that. T says Cincinnati gets all the recruits, the Kentucky and Ohio area that Ohio State doesn't get now. And I think that'll be even bigger once they join the Power 5 conference in about 2 or 3 years now. Terrence said JSU is 25 in the FCS poll. Yeah, they're number 25 in the coaches poll. I believe they're 26 or 27 in the stats perform poll, which is like the official poll they use for the playoffs. They're right outside the top 25. The number one thing hurting Jackson State is their non-conference schedule. And I'll vent to y'all real quick, and I want to see how y'all feel about this. And a lot of those SWAC groups, everyone got upset about this. I saw 3, 4, 5 posts screaming about Prairie View and Jackson State not being ranked and FAMU not being ranked. Well, my response to that, and I don't really talk in the SWAT groups because I mean they're so toxic, man. I'm not gonna lie. I personally look in the SWAT groups and I just get nauseous looking at some of the people arguing in there. But the reason they're not ranked any higher is they haven't. Who have they beat, guys? That is why I have been screaming to schedule some non-conference games. Your best non-conference win is Tennessee State, who right now isn't even near in the conversation for the FCS top 25. And on top of that, your second best non-conference win is D2 Delta State, who is a very good D2 team. I got you. But guess what? That top 25 is filled with teams who have beat FBS teams this year, who have beat other FCS teams this year, especially once you get up in the top 15. JSU, if you want to be a real contender, like you don't have to worry about the playoffs. I get it. We won't get to that debate. You have to go play somebody if you want any type of respect in these rankings. You have to go do some sort of scheduling deal with somebody. You have to go win your FBS games. That you played UL Monroe close. That's great. But there's teams in that top 25 that beat ranked FBS teams on the road. That's the fundamental difference. And so for me, as much as I'm on this bandwagon with everyone, and I get a lot of pushback for some reason. I'm on the bandwagon with you. I want to see the SWAC get better, but it's just like this whole wave of people fighting back against me, saying we can't play better teams because of this, this, and this. It's like, well, then you can't scream when you don't get the respect that those teams who are playing other real teams get. Montana went out and played a Washington, a top 20 team, and won. Eastern Washington went and played a UNLV and won. South Dakota State went and played Colorado State and won by 20. It's just that's the fundamental difference. That's the only thing holding the SWAC back is you don't play nobody. Alabama A&M could have been ranked, but you went and played Tuskegee and struggled. You have to play bigger and better teams. There's no reason you shouldn't be playing Jacksonville State, Samford, Sam Houston State. All these teams around you, Incarnate World, which one team did and got absolutely demolished. So for me, that's the big difference here, man. And that is why I get so frustrated with fans who push back and say that we ain't got SWAC hours and we ain't got this. It's like, I don't need SWAC hours. I got college football hours. And when you don't have a strong schedule, you don't get ranked high. That's the same reason why Coastal Carolina ain't making the playoffs at 12-0. Because they don't play nobody. And so that's all it is. And I don't want to get caught on that bandwagon. I don't want to get caught on that bandwagon, with you guys again, because we've had like 5 episodes about that, and I've seen all the comments, so we'll move on from that. Sonic Boom said, "What thoughts on Gruden? When are you guys making a coaching list for Bethune, UAPB, Southern, and Bama State?" Excuse me. Thoughts on Gruden? Man, I'm not an NFL guy, and I'm really not as up to the story as I should be. But I know he sent some emails with some like racist and homophobic language. Man, you can't do that now, man. And so he deserved to be fired and deserved to be resigned. And he's already had some issues in the past. So for me, he was on his last leg anyway. And everything in football revolves around winning. And so all that surrounded by you not winning and having such a big contract just led to his dismissal, and he should have been fired, you know, already in my opinion. But yeah, I'm glad that the Raiders made the move, and now personally, Sonic Boom, I would like to see them go try to hire Eric Bellamy from the Chiefs, the offensive coordinator who has been long due for a job. That's the hire for them. Go one, take away from your division rival, and two, show that you are, progressive and actually taking this hiring process seriously, and don't just use the good old boy club that you used last time. Um, let's see. Crazy Criminal said PV plays Texas A&M in November. Don't see a W. Crazy Criminal, I don't see a W either. We'll just leave it at that. Terrence, yes, if they would have beat ULM, they'd probably be in the top 20 right now, to be completely honest with you. T said JSU not ready for JMU, Eastern Washington, Montana, Dakota schools. Yeah, probably not right now, to be honest. And um, so yeah, they had the guts to schedule them, but Crazy Criminal, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, I don't need you to go beat an SEC team to prove to me you're good. I just want you to go beat the teams that you want to be ranked with. I just need you to go play the Sam Houston States. Go play the, who do you want to put up there? The Eastern Washingtons, the Montanas, the Dakotas. I mean, and you don't even have to travel. Just see if you could do a neutral site. And I know that goes up into the ADs. Like, I don't need you to be the SEC team. Everyone who got on Alabama State for not beating Auburn is just crazy to me. You don't have to beat an Auburn and Jordan Hare. Who in the SWAC's even competing with an Auburn? You're talking about even Jackson State. They had one top 50 recruiting class. Do you know how many years in a row Auburn's had probably a top 20 recruiting class? It's just not comparable. I need you to go beat the teams you're supposed to beat, like Alcorn or Southern. I believe it was Southern. Why aren't you beating McNeese? McNeese isn't even a top 25 team, and they came back and beat you. Those are the type of games you have to win if you want the respect of the rest of the country, man. You got to go beat a Citadel, a Kennesaw State, someone like that. I don't care if you schedule A&M and lose, because you're not supposed to beat Texas A&M. And if you do, great for your program, but that's not the goal here. The goal is to get you relevant on the FCS level and then move up. We're trying to we're trying to jump 10 steps instead of taking it step by step. You got to take it one bit at a time. And the thing is, you got to win your non-conference games. And like T said, McNeese is 15-0 against SWAC schools. McNeese is not even that good of a program, guys. McNeese should not be 15-0 against your conference. And they're not playing the Mississippi Valleys. They're beating the Southerns, the Alcorns, teams like that. That's the problem. Sonic Boom says Southern needs to bring back Folk and add some FCS and NFL guys to the staff. I definitely agree with that. I was talking to SWAC Talk on Instagram yesterday, who's kind of a Southern guy. He said that Southern isn't high on hiring a celebrity coach. So apparently Southern, all the fans have said it, but apparently on the inside of the program, they're not very high on hiring a celebrity coach. They would much rather hire an alumnus or, someone who graduated from the program or anything like that. And so for me, I said it, I guess it was a few months ago when Southern had the opening. Jabbar Jalouk, the running back coach at Louisiana Lafayette, is a Southern alum. He has Baton Rouge ties. He's coached at these top programs. He's coached at LSU. He's coached at Louisiana Lafayette. Hire him. That for me would do so much for recruiting. He's an offensive minded guy. You're a running based program. Why not go hire the running backs coach at a high level university like that, who has ties to your university and has ties to the area? So Jalouk, for me, is the number one hire in terms of me for Southern this year. And the other ones I'll have to do some research. But Sonic Boom, what I'll do, man, is I'll research it, and that will be a topic on Week 8 Mailbag, is who would be the top candidates for all four of those jobs, and we'll break it down live on our Week 8 Mailbag. Um, the CFL podcast, JSU probably won't be ready for James Madison or Sam Houston State, but I damn sure would love to see it. I absolutely agree, CFL. I was talking to Scotty after the Alabama A&M game on my drive home. I would pay so much money to just see them play one of those teams. Even if they don't win, I just want to see what they could do because they have the talent on paper to play. It's just, would they execute against a high level team like that? Because you look at the pass rush for JSU, how much film and great visibility would it be for a James Houston, a Niles Gaddy, a Coinus Miller to go up against the 4 NFL potential prospects for North Dakota State? Yeah, everyone wants to say we've got to care about the players. Why would you want them to have some film against the best of the best in the FCS on the offensive line? I'm just saying that would be an absolute, just perfect opportunity to get your players some shine on the biggest stage. Unstoppable 25 says Southern had a celebrity coach when they hired Stump Mitchell, but it did not work out for them. T said they would get good games as measuring sticks. Sonic Boom said JSU will be ready for out-of-conference games after another good recruiting class, especially with an improved O-line. Crazy Criminal said FCS overall is a lot more competitive this year. Lots of upsets. Yes. And I think I addressed it on last Mailbag or one of the lives I did. This year is so crazy on both levels because of how big the transfer portal was. Usually the gaps like this, I think the gap closed up because the top teams lost all their good talent to the NFL still. But a lot of the smaller teams in the FCS level got in a lot of transfers and got to keep a lot of their players due to that extra year of eligibility. So you have a lot of continuity on these weaker Power 5 teams at the FCS level. And so the top teams had a lot of turnover still. And so therefore that talent gap is shrunk. And so for me, I think that was the biggest difference in terms of why you see so many upsets this year. I believe the FCS already set the record for most FBS upsets in a season. So that, for me, that's the reason why you see that. Drizzy said, I think JSU could stand a chance against Sam Houston. Their quarterback play is kind of suspect. JSU defense will show up for sure. And I'm pretty sure Ezard, the wide receiver, is hurt, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be a huge loss. So, yeah, right now, Sam Houston State would be an interesting game to see. John said, I don't follow Southern that closely, but they seem to make peculiar decisions at times. T said, Morgan State has 3 former NFL players as coaches, and they are the worst. Yeah, just because you have a lot of NFL talent or history, might not necessarily mean you're going to be a great coach. It's your boy Oz. You should also do a midseason all SWAC first and second team. I'll get that together for you, Oz, and I'll probably try to drop it next week. Just this past week was so busy with me traveling to Huntsville for the A&M game. So I will definitely get that. Blue, your JSU would schedule lower class FBS opponents or top. Would you rather schedule lower class FBS opponents or top level FCS? So Drizzy, if I had to pick, I would say, you can get your money games in if you want and schedule those FBS teams. So usually you have 3 or 4 games that you can kind of be flexible with in how you schedule. You can schedule both. You can have your Louisiana Monroe game, and instead of playing Delta State, why not go play Sam Houston State? Why not go play Jacksonville State, one state over? So for me, I think you can have both, but if I had to pick one right this second, Drizzy, I would say play the top level comp in the FCS because that's the way you're going to prove where you are. And then once you beat those teams, then you can go on and play the lower level FBS teams. And also beating a top level FCS team, if you beat that team, everything they do on from that point, there's going to be fans that say, oh, Jackson State beat Sam Houston State. They made it to the semifinals of the playoffs. So just imagine how good JSU could be. That's the narrative that would come. So for me, I personally think scheduling top level comp in the FCS is the goal, especially. So Drizzy, this is also the other question. If you don't want to play in the playoffs, which I get the argument why not, and I disagree, and we'll just keep it at that. If you don't want to go play in the playoffs, playing those top level teams in non-conference games in the regular season gives you the credit and visibility throughout the season. So if you win the Celebration Bowl and you still got wins over Sam Houston and Jacksonville State, and those teams make playoff runs, then they're like, well, damn, man, that Jackson State team must be really good over there. Even though they weren't in the playoffs, they're probably still one of the best teams in the country because they beat those other high level FCS teams. So that's kind of where I'm thinking on that. So I would say top level comp in the FCS jersey would be my pick. Um, T says top level. Yeah, 1-1, like I said. How long has the staff been at Morgan? The guys still have to have the right experience. I'm not sure, Sonic Boom, off the top of my head, how long they've been there, but that would be a good question. But guys, let me go ahead and cover it. Y'all can still submit y'all's questions. So, um, breaking down the college football playoff race before we just address your comments before we get out of here. So, what I think they're going. So, breaking down this race, I broke it down to two things. I got it: win and you're in, and then I have need some help and or I have some questions about how you can get in there. So the winning you're in goes as follows. Number one, Georgia is winning you're in. If they win out there in, guys, I don't care if the apocalypse hits. Georgia's playing in the college football playoffs if they win out, because if they win out, they'll have the SEC champion. If they're an undefeated SEC champion, they're in the playoffs. Iowa at number two, they're in if they win out. An undefeated Big Ten champ is not missing the playoffs. Number four, Oklahoma, 6-0. If they went out there and an undefeated Big 12 champ is not missing the playoffs. Also, Alabama, Ohio State, Penn State are the one-loss teams that personally I think have a win in you're in. Alabama wins out with a win over Georgia. They'd be in. Ohio State and Penn State, they have to play each other, but if either one of those teams went out there in the playoffs too, then these are the teams that I think if they win out, they should be in. But personally, John, I'm not saying they will win out. I'm just kind of giving my synopsis on if they do, they should be in. And then Michigan, Michigan State, Kentucky, and Oklahoma State are 8 through 13, all undefeated. If for some and listen, guys, I'm going to say this: none of these teams are winning out. But if they did, they all be in if they won out. Michigan, Michigan State, Kentucky, Oklahoma State are all undefeated. Michigan State would be Big Ten champs if they won out. Kentucky would have to win this weekend and probably go beat Alabama. Not very likely. Oklahoma State would have to win out and beat Oklahoma this year. So that would be the big thing for me. And so these are the teams that I think need some help. It breaks my heart to say this, guys. Cincinnati at number 3. They're not a win in your end because this is the situation I'm worried of. What happens, guys, if Georgia's undefeated and Bama beats Georgia in the SEC championship? So you have a one-loss Georgia and a one-loss Alabama that are both probably in. And then what if Oklahoma and Iowa went out? I don't think Cincinnati would hold water because of their strength of schedule. So what Cincinnati has to have happen is Alabama or Georgia lose before the SEC championship, and or the Big Ten champion have probably 2 losses or something like that happen, and or Oklahoma lose. They have to have some of these top teams lose, because if things stay the same, Cincinnati is probably going to find themselves in that 5th position. The other team, Oregon, 4-1. They have that huge win over over Ohio State in week 2. Oregon has to have some of these teams in front of them lose. They should get some help with all these Big Ten teams having to play each other. But the only way Oregon makes it through is if complete chaos happens. And then the team I want y'all to keep an eye on. This is going to be an interesting team. Wake Forest is sitting there about 15 in the country at 6-0. If they're an undefeated ACC champion, where does Wake Forest fall into this? So what they would need to happen is a lot of these teams having to, in my opinion, lose a game or two. Wake Forest is a very, very big long shot. But personally, I think if an undefeated Wake Forest gets in there with a win over Clemson, a win over some of these other ACC teams, Wake Forest is going to be someone that could really make the race very interesting. And I'll be the first to say, I did not see Wake Forest ever being undefeated at this point, but they are. So you got to mention them in the playoff race. So it's week 7, guys. That's why there's a lot of teams win if you're in, but we're going to get a lot of clarity as we get to the weeks. If Kentucky loses this week, they're out. Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State all got to kind of play each other. So for me, I personally don't think those teams are going to hang around. For me, the two shakeups, the two dark horses in this race that can make pure chaos happen is Oregon and Cincinnati. If they win out, man, that conversation is going to get very, very interesting. If Oregon wins the Pac-12 and they're like, man, we just choked one game against Stanford, and Cincinnati's like, man, we got two Power Five wins. We have they SMU's ranked, and I think that Houston, maybe Houston could be ranked. I don't know. They probably will have three ranked wins on their resume. So Cincinnati will be like, man, we won out again. Like, you got to let us in. So it's really going to come down to whether Bama and Georgia can, keep their one losses. But if one of them loses multiple games, like two losses, they're out of the conversation. And Oregon and Cincinnati will definitely make it interesting. But let me get to y'all's comments, man. Let me scroll way up here, man. Y'all are crazy. Let's see. Off script, man. What is up, man? CFL, are they going to expand the playoffs by next year? I'm sick of 4 teams, bro. So CFL, I've heard it's probably going to be 2025 at the earliest. And that's if, I'll say if, because the Pac-12, Big Ten, and ACC alliance supposedly has been talking about voting against the expanded playoffs. So I don't know if that's still in the works. But right now, if they're going to move to 12 teams, 2024 to 2025 will probably be the earliest you see that. In my opinion. Let's see. Iowa, Ohio State will decide the Big Ten champ. That game's going to be so good, man. Absolutely good. I think the FCS should have a 4-team playoff in the rest be bowl games. Jordan, I've been screaming for that. I think the FCS should have bowl games. Absolutely. Just have a few. You don't have to have the 49 that the FBS has, but I think they should keep it at 16 and allow those teams from like 17 to 30 just to have like 10 or 12 bowl games to play each other and generate some extra income for the FCS. Put them on the ESPN networks in early January to February when you're not competing with a lot of things other than NFL on Sundays. I think it could be a great revenue generator for these FCS programs. So I absolutely agree with you that bowl games should be a thing at the FCS level. Crazy Criminal says Cincinnati has to win out. Conference strength of schedule could be an issue if Alabama OU wins out. I completely agree. John said he does not want to see Cincinnati in the playoffs. Cincinnati should not be number 3 right now. John said that he believes the playoff committee and New Year's Six Bowls are set up the way they are to keep the group of 5 kids at the little kids table. I completely agree with you on that. Drizzy says Cincy for the Natty. CFL said, I'm sick of us choking. So CFL's an Oregon fan, guys. They choked against Stanford pretty bad. CFL, the rest did kind of rob y'all, though. I will give you that at least. Mark Britson says, no, Cincinnati would not sell enough tickets. The Pac-12 has been underperforming, according to Crazy Criminal. John said, I hope Notre Dame loses more than 3 games, so Cincy won't have that quality win. Notre Dame is such a key to this race, too. If Notre Dame wins out, and they're sitting there with their only loss to Cincinnati, it's going to be very, very hard to keep Cincinnati out of the playoffs. Grambling is the other team that lost to McNeese. Wake Forest is unbelievable. John said Wake Forest is in if they're undefeated, but they will get boat race. T has Clemson over Wake Forest. Drizzy said his uncle played football for Cincinnati and been going crazy since Bama lost. I agree, man. Cincinnati at number 3 is insane. I don't think anyone saw Wake Forest perform like this. If Wake Forest beats Clemson, they go to the top. Oregon State is hot right now. The Civil War. Yeah, Oregon State, man, they beat Washington like a week ago, and they're kind of on a roll. That program is on such an upward trajectory. They really shocked a lot of people last season, and this year they're playing really, really good football, and that coaching staff up there is recruiting at a much higher level than what they did in the previous few 10 years of coaches. John said Pac-12 teams have a way of losing focus later in the year, so Oregon probably won't win out. Drizzy said he's tired of Bama and Clemson. I agree. Sonic Boom said they should do 6 teams with the first round bye. I like that. I've always been a fan of 12, but I'll be okay with 6 or 8 as well. T said, yeah, keep the FCS playoffs. John said playoff expansion first round equals participation trophies for 9 and 3 teams that have already proven they don't belong in the playoff race yet. Oh, man. So, John, would you like to see it stay at 4, or would you like to see it maybe go to like 6? I want to hear your thoughts on that. the rest can be like the NIT according to T. I'll probably take about 10 more minutes worth of questions, guys. Then I got to run. I got another podcast appearance tonight. But T said, do you think Eastern Washington can beat the Dakota schools? Ah, man. T, I'm gonna keep it real with you. If when you have a quarterback like Eric Barrier on that team and the wide receiving unit that they have and the offensive line that can protect him, if Eastern Washington gets hot, they can beat anybody in the country at the FCS level. I'm just going to keep it 100 with you. It's just, can they keep that consistency and keep that momentum late into the season and hit their stride right as those playoffs are coming? They showed that they could face adversity and win a tough game against Montana a few weeks ago. So on primetime too, they flex that game to ESPN2. So for me, Eastern Washington and Eric Barrier showed that they can compete with anybody. They got the FBS win. I think they absolutely could beat South Dakota State, T. Now, I think North Dakota State would be a little bit harder, but what Eric Barrier could do to North Dakota State is put pressure on Quincy Patterson and that offense to score more than they're probably used to in big games. I mean, North Dakota State has the ability to grind out wins, but in my opinion, I think Eastern Washington it probably could beat anyone in the country. And for me, right now, T, I would have them as the number one team in the country right now in the FCS. They got the best win. They got the FBS win, and I don't think anyone's been more impressive than Eastern Washington right now. Let's see. Sonic said blowing us off for his VIP podcast. Nah, man, not man. Hey, it's on YouTube. Go to Frankly Speaking Sports. I'll be on there with him. We got to deal with him where I'll come on every Tuesday for an hour, talk college football. We got a Cincinnati beat reporter tonight. So Frankly Speaking Sports on YouTube. That's where you can catch me starting at 8 p.m. Central Time. John said, I understand it has to expand to say the bowl system, but I'm not sure how many teams it should be. I can make my piece at 8, but I have a feeling we're going to go with 16. I wouldn't love 16, John. I think 12 is the sweet spot. Anything above that, man, I think it's going to turn into too much, because I agree that once you get to 16, you're going to have just like 8-4 teams at times sneaking into the playoffs, and I don't think it'll work. But the one thing I do agree, John, or that I disagree there, is you would have a chance for some crazy upsets. So just imagine like a team has some big injuries. They lose a few games early. You've got like a 10-2 team that just got their star quarterback back, and they make a Cinderella run to the national championship. That's the trade-off. It doesn't happen often, but when you look at March Madness, you see so many teams pull off the upset. So if you could just get a year or two of that happening, it would be great. But I think the sweet spot's 12, but I agree 16 is way, way too much in my opinion. Right now, I think they're going to do, as much as they're talking 12, I think they're going to take a half step and make it like an 8 or 16 playoff just to see how it works, and then potentially expand beyond that. T said Eric Barrier is going to have a hard time being drafted because of his height. Yeah, probably. But the thing saving him is the production. He's going to have a big Senior Bowl if he can get into there. Mark Brinson, Bama will not be in the playoffs. Whoever wins the East will beat them. Mark, I agree. Right now, man, I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. I don't think anyone beats Georgia right now. I don't think there's anyone in the country that wants to see the Bulldogs, especially when they get to full strength. No one's talking about it. They're doing this with a backup quarterback, without their two best wide receivers, without their best defensive back in Tyke Smith, and without two offensive linemen. That's what Georgia's doing when they're not healthy, guys. And on top of that, they lost one of their running backs last week. But when Dalvin Cook's brother's your third string running back, I say you got pretty good depth. So for me, I just think it's Georgia and the rest of the pack as we're talking right now. So we got a question, thoughts on the Big South Conference, especially Kennesaw versus North Carolina A&T game. Listen, we're going to find out a lot about North Carolina A&T this week. Jermaine Martin has finally started to click. He had a very, very rough start to the season, and North Carolina A&T really struggled early because they couldn't run the ball, but they've been getting it clicking. Kennesaw is no joke, though. They absolutely embarrassed Jacksonville State a few weeks ago. That team is solid at almost every level of the defense. So for me, it's going to come down to whether Jermaine Martin can take some pressure off that passing attack for A&T and really get that offense rolling. I think it's going to be a close game. I got to do some more research before I give you an official prediction, but right now I would have to lean toward Kennesaw and winning that game in a close one. But we will definitely see moving forward. Agree. North Carolina A&T and Kennesaw will be a big game. North Carolina A&T has been struggling. John said, crazy upsets. This is college football. Cinderella doesn't live here. The NCAA tournament is what you're looking for. I agree, John. More often than not, the top 4 teams in the country are clear. So that's why I think maybe 6 teams would be the number one thing there. John said food poisoning to UGA's D-line is the only thing that can beat the Bulldogs. CFL said he needs to see them beat Bama first. They always find a way to lose to them. Man, CFL, if there's ever a year Kirby Smart has run out of excuses not to win the national championship, it's this year. If they don't win it this year, man, you're looking at Kirby Smart now like, damn, man, what is it going to take for you to get over the hump? Because you got Bama not looking consistent. Oklahoma looks very inconsistent. The number 3 team in the country, Cincinnati, who you beat in the Peach Bowl last year. And then you got an Iowa team averaging like 20 points a game as the number 2 team in the country. You got to look at Georgia like, man, when are y'all going to pull this off? You're just looking at it like, man, you got to figure it out if you're Kirby Smart. He said, T said Kennesaw's defense is crazy. Crazy criminal. Boise got a huge W versus BYU. Cougars are out of the New Year's Six Bowl for sure. Yeah, man, BYU's in a weird place. So I don't know if they're out of the New Year's Six particularly. It's going to come down to whether Coastal wins out. Crazy criminal. And also whether Cincinnati makes the playoffs. So Cincinnati can slide into a playoff spot that opens up a spot in the New Year's Six. But if Cincinnati doesn't, they're going to take that spot, and Coastal's going to get the second. BYU has to win this week, Crazy Criminal. They play Baylor. And for me, Baylor's going to be a great win for them. They're a 1-loss Big 12 team. And if BYU wins that game, it will give them 3 Pac-12 wins, 1 over Arizona State, which was ranked, another one over Utah that was ranked. And then on top of that, they get a Baylor win in one of the better Big 12 teams in the country this year. So I wouldn't count BYU all the way out. They're just going to need some help because they're going to need Coastal to slip up somewhere and lose a game here or there. Now, Aaron Sanders said Coach Prime keeps winning and putting players in the spotlight to go pro. The transfer portal will be big. Players will be running to JSU. Man, they were last year. We're definitely going to see John said this isn't the same UGA team of the past. Kirby has lost some of his conservative ways, and that defense is just insanely good. I agree, man. Listen, all Georgia has to do, I have tough times doing these previews. I like to be very, analytical, do my research, bring y'all stuff that y'all can't get on any other channel. It's so hard doing a Georgia preview because it's like the key to the game is the same. Run the football, set up the play action attack, take your 3-4 deep shots each game, and play defense. That's the key. If y'all watch a preview from Georgia, just skip that part of the show. That is the key to any Georgia game. Run the football, control the clock, and play defense. If Georgia scores 20 points, they're probably going to win 99.9% of the time this season. And it's absolutely impressive, man. I've been working on doing the membership thing, and that way I can do some film reviews without copyright and stuff. I really want to do a film breakdown of this defense because I personally think this Georgia defense can go down as the best defense in the history of college football. I think that has that type of potential as early as it is in the season. Let's see. Aaron Sanders says Bluebloods. I saw Bama's roster, and I think they will lose O-line and linebackers to the portal. What if the Brockmire brothers go to JSU? Aaron, I'm gonna be honest. I don't think the Brockmire brothers are going to JSU. If they transfer, they're going to probably transfer to Texas with their other brother. And also, the thing that helps Bama that people overlook every year is that all their linebackers are upperclassmen. So they're all about to leave, and all those younger linebackers are probably going to step up into starting roles. And the offensive line is going to have so many spots next year where those guys can step in. You look at Javon Cohen, you look at both Brockmire brothers. The one player I could see the younger brother, the lower rated one. I believe he's the center, possibly transferring. I just personally believe the Brockmeyers would probably go to Texas to be closer with their families than JSU. But that's just me. If JSU can land the Brockmeyer brothers, go ahead, build a statue of Coach Prime, and go ahead and try to get him to sign a lifetime contract because that would be huge for the interior of that Jackson State offensive line. I just personally think they would probably try to go to Texas with their other brother closer to their family, and Texas really needs some O-line help, especially next year. Um, let's see, Agree Blue that he's got to take care of business. What is up, Mr. Moore, man? Appreciate you tuning in. Off script and the delusional fans, but can he do it under pressure? It's a throwback to Murder Ball. Um, let's see. I saw that list, and JSU can beat all the teams on that list. Sam Houston almost got beat by SF Austin. JSU just has to play them, man. Aaron, I've been begging. I would pay whatever amount of money you wanted me to pay to see Jackson State play some of these top schools in the FCS. Cedric said, "Hey, CFL and Bluebloods, do y'all think Kentucky could possibly beat Alabama or Georgia?" Listen, Kentucky, I think, would have a better shot at beating Bama right now than for me. They have a better chance of beating Bama than Georgia because Georgia's run defense is better. If you saw Florida establish to run against Alabama and almost pull off the upset, I personally believe that Georgia is going to stop the run, and that's why Kentucky's not going to be able to pull the upset. Sadly, Kentucky doesn't play Bama, but if they did, I think they would have a better chance of beating Bama than they would Georgia, just because of the run defense difference between Georgia and Alabama. Um, John said you won't be able to fit Georgia's defense under the salary cap. Oh man, that's probably true. Let's see. John Brockmeyer's brothers are considered JSU. Now, John, I don't know if they are. He was just asking the hypothetical if they transferred and came to JSU, what it could mean. Prime gets an automatic extension if they win the SWAC. Well, that's a great clause to have because he's definitely looking like he's going to do it. But John said Kentucky would have a puncher's chance against Bama, but Bama would be the favorite. And also, it would depend on where the games play. Kentucky is a completely different team when they're not playing at home compared to on the road. Going into Tuscaloosa or into Athens to win a game is absolutely huge. And for me, if the game this weekend was in Kentucky, I would give Kentucky a way better chance to beat Georgia in Kroger Field compared to Athens. Because listen, guys, I've been to Athens. That's arguably the loudest stadium I have ever been to in my life. I was there for some big moments. I was there when they played Alabama. I was there when they played Auburn when they were ranked. So for me, I just think playing in Athens and pulling the upset is way different than playing at home and trying to come away with the win there. John, I don't know if anyone in the portal is considering, because in the middle of the season, it's very rare to see transfers announced where they're going. I would wait to stay tuned till the end of December after the season, because these players want to see who goes into the NFL, who else transfers out of the program, because they want to make sure they make the right decisions for their career, make sure they're not going anywhere where they won't, be overlooked for a starting job or something like that. Brinson, we would beat Bama. Georgia's a small chance. I'm a UK fan, but that's the reason we play the games. I completely agree, Mark. Who should the Southland Conference go after in football? Okay, Crazy Criminals, stick with me. So this is just on the football field. I'm not talking finance. I'm not talking contracts. I don't know anything about that. I think they should go after some of the top D2 teams. I'm looking at a West Florida. I'm looking at possibly a Delta State. Someone like that could be some great people to bring up and try to build a conference organically like that. So for me, that's who I would probably first have on the list. And then on top of that, if you're the Southland, I just don't know who you're pulling, because you're not pulling from the ASUN. You're not pulling from the WAC. You probably can't pull from the SWAC. So you're looking around. Your only option is really those top D2 teams. So can you convince, the top D2 teams in your area to try to make the transition to FCS and play in the Southland Conference? So it is a huge step down. But man, when I look at it, there's really not a lot of great options for the Southland unless they just dissipate and all those teams go across the ASUN, the WAC, things like that. So that's personally what I would do. Um, Aaron said teams on that list go look at some of their games. They are not good. I think JSU defense can hold a lot of them. John said Georgia would have to self-destruct to lose to UK. Do you think Valley will pull off the upset against Alcorn? Unstoppable. I'm not sure. Personally, on this upset, I would have a tough time. Listen, it's going to come down to the offensive line of Alcorn like it does every game. If they protect Felix, he can beat any team in the country or in the FCS. I personally think that Valley's going to have to run the ball, control the clock, and try to get pressure on Felix Harper. Now, can they do that? I'm not sure. And also, you got to stop the run game of Alcorn. But if I had to pick right now with no, background research or anything, I'm saying Alcorn wins the game. But I think it's closer than a lot of people think. And he said, we still call it Commonwealth. It'll never be Kroger. Hey, fair enough, man. Honestly, don't believe those top FCS schools will be willing to play JSU. That's interesting. Yes, they will. They feel like they could win. Sam Houston has one good player. Man, listen, Aaron Ezzard at wide receivers, legit. That dude is completely built different at wide receiver. I tried to get him on the show. We didn't get to work anything out. I'm going to try to have him on after the season, but he's legit. JSU barely beat FAMU, lost to ULM. Eastern Washington beat UNLV. South Dakota State punished Colorado State. Montana beat Washington. Let's see. After homecoming, we will probably move up a couple spots. Yeah, depending on who wins and loses. Delta State has no fan base, no money to be made. Yeah, Joe Eagle. That's what I was saying. I mean, the money and things are out of my understanding and connections. Just strictly on the football field, it's like, who does the Southland pull other than top D2 teams? I personally think the Southland is going to have to dissipate and or try to see if they can have a scheduling alliance, kind of like the ASUN and WAC did this year. First named after one. There's no upside for them, especially when they're out of conference and not paying you to play. So first named after, I don't know about that because I'm pretty sure I got to look it up what year. North Dakota State paid like $300 or $400K to North Carolina A&T to come play them. So maybe that's the case. But we'll have to see. I mean, personally, I think what they have to do is the ADs have to step up for these SWAC schools and vouch for themselves and try to get fair deals moving forward. So that's going to be the number one thing I want to see. I want Valley to win, but I should be wanting division teams to lose. Sam Houston has the top safety. Yeah, Copeland, I believe, was his last name. Crazy Criminal, I think UWS to the Big South ASUN would be a good move. Yeah, West Florida is ready to move up from D2. Now, I don't know about Delta State like, the comment just said, but West Florida's ready. West Florida's got real FCS talent. They're beating FCS teams. So for me, West Florida is a team that I'm looking to move up this season, in my opinion. Top FCS teams pay and split ticket sales. If that's the case, we got to get some of these games scheduled. But guys, I got to run to this other podcast. Y'all can tune into Frankly Speaking Sports on YouTube, man. I got to deal with him, man. I got to come on every Tuesday, talk some college football with him. But guys, next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Central, this is a reoccurring thing. I'm glad y'all turned out for this one, man. It will always be on Tuesday night, 6:30 right here. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe if you're new, man. And also check out our community page. That way y'all can comment below. Y'all can get y'all's questions in early, and we can go ahead and have them on the topic list, man. And I can do some research and get y'all all the great info on all y'all's college football questions. But listen, man, I can't thank y'all enough for the support of the podcast. Can't believe we've grown like this. So shout out to all of y'all tuned in right now. Love y'all, man. But listen, for right now, the Blue Bloods are out.